wow, I don't think anybody can say that they expected that. Terence Crawford squeaks by a win against Israil Madrimov in a fight that unanimous decision for Bud. But the scorecards, and if you watch the fight, it tells a different story, I think. While I know a lot of people are saying they have Madrimov in that fight, personally, I did have Bud winning. I'll get that out there. I had him winning 7-5, aka 115-113 on the scorecard, which is what two of the three judges had it. The other judge had it 116-112, so I'm not mad at the scorecards. I know that some people are saying, hey, Bud's the challenger, Madrimov is the champion. The challenger has to go ahead and take it, like a dominating performance. I know that's what Eddie Hearn was saying after the fight. To a degree, I totally understand that, but I think Bud, he was able to get the better of Madrimov in the rounds. He was able to just do enough in some of these rounds to get the win. I'm really anticipating to see what the judges had, the scorecards, because say they had Bud winning 6 out of the 11 rounds, aka 6-5 in the 11th round going to the 12th round. If they gave Bud that round, right, make it 7-5, give you that 115-113 scorecard, say Madrimov wins that round, it's 114-114, a majority draw. So I'm anticipating to see what exactly the judges' scorecards were. If they already had Crawford at 7 rounds and he was going to win, or if it was 6-5 and Crawford had to win that final round to win the fight. But I think the main takeaway from this fight is 154, it's a different animal. It's not 147. I think Bud felt the power of Madrimov. Heck, we saw a mouse, I believe it was his right eye, started swelling, honestly, really early in the fight. I think the power of Madrimov really kept Bud away from not doing what he usually does. Both are trying to counter. Madrimov is extremely awkward. His upper body movements, I was kind of looking like, this guy kind of looks like he really hasn't boxed. He's just moving all over the place. Definitely had boxed before. They talked about his amateur record. He knew what he was doing. He was throwing off Terence Crawford's timing. I talked about this in my preview. That was really what he needed to do. I said if he can just get Terence Crawford off his timing, he'll be in this fight. Granted, I only thought he was going to be able to do that for the first few rounds, not the entire fight. But Crawford just never got going. For Madrimov, I think one thing that killed him is he'd throw one shot, he'd throw a good shot that lands, and he would only throw one punch. He would not follow in combinations. I believe his corner was telling him, throw more punches. He just wouldn't do that. And I think ultimately that might have cost him the fight because I think his punches weren't hurting Terence Crawford, but they're making Crawford think one more second. He'd get hit, and Crawford wasn't immediately countering. Crawford, probably one of, if not the best counterpunchers in the game. He felt those punches. Again, I don't think they hurt him, but he felt them. He wasn't immediately able to return a right hand or a left hand. So I think 154 for Crawford, I think that's the way he needs to stay at and really build after the remainder of his career. Really interesting matchup. Turkey Al-Sheikh mentioned it. Virgil Ortiz. Ortiz fights next week. I'm excited to see that. That would be a really good fight. We'll see what happens there. The second point, and this is the point I think a lot of people can agree on after this fight, is I think the Bud versus Canelo fight lost a lot of momentum. I think Crawford, I had said this before, I think going up all the way to 168 was going to be biting off too much he could chew. And after this fight, this coincides with my first point about 154 being another animal. I just don't think 168, especially against Canelo, at 168, I don't care if Canelo's getting older, what's happening. I just don't think that's a good idea for Terence Crawford. I understand financially it's amazing. It'll do incredible. Both guys are all-time great fighters. We saw it with Jermell Charlo, and I'm not saying Charlo and Crawford are the same. I'm saying the weight comparison. Charlo went up to fight Canelo. He didn't want to punch because he was afraid every time he punched, he'd get hit with Canelo, and that power was different at 168. Crawford, remember, he started at 135. 168, I don't think would be a good idea. I think Canelo would make Crawford gun-shy. And while Crawford does have a lot of pride, Madrimov hit him with a few shots. Madrimov almost landed a few right hands that could have done real damage. I think Canelo could do real damage. Terence Crawford, seeing him get acclimated to 154 and the strength of Madrimov, I just don't think 168 and against Canelo is a good idea at all for Bud Crawford. For Crawford at 154, you have Virgil Ortiz, some Sebastian Fundora, Tim Tszyu. If Earl Spence gets a win, a Spence rematch, there's a lot of fights at 154. Jermell Charlo, granted Charlo's going to need to come back and get a win before he fights Crawford. There's a lot of fights at 54. I think you got to stay at 54. But overall, I'm not mad at the score. I'm not mad that Crawford won. I think Crawford won. I had him. Again, winning 7-5, 115, 113. But props to Israil Madrimov. He put on a heck of a performance. I know Sean Porter on the broadcast was saying it was a very wide margin. I didn't see that. I saw it close. I did think the broadcast was leaning towards Madrimov a little bit. Crawford had some good punches. I think Crawford later in those rounds, and I predicted a later round knockout. I thought Crawford was going to be able to figure him out and get him out of there, 10th through 12th. He wasn't. He really turned up in the 12th round, landed some clean shots. I think it was just a little too late. But then again, we have to remember Crawford was off for a year. Ring rust could play a factor. He downloads data at the start. I think Crawford, he just ran out of time. I think it was only a matter of time before he was going to really get Madrimov. I think that 11th round, Crawford had some really good combinations, and Madrimov came in and clinched to kind of just keep his feet and get to the bell. But Terence Crawford gets the win in his 154 debut. It wasn't pretty, but they all don't have to be pretty. Crawford, he's shown us he's an all-time great fighter. So just getting the win, that's all you need to do. He also gets a belt at 154, the WBA. We'll see what he wants to do next. I don't know how many fights Terence Crawford has left in his career. He sounds like a man who is happy with his accomplishments. We'll see. I think 2 or 3, if he gets the Canelo fight, that might be one of his last fights. We got to see, but as of right now, I don't want to see the Crawford-Canelo fight. After the Spence beatdown, that was a huge fight. Right now, I tweeted it. It lost a lot of momentum. But the important thing is for Terence Crawford, he gets the win at 154, remains undefeated, 41-0, 31 knockouts. He's going to feel more comfortable at 54 in these upcoming fights. I'm excited to see what direction he goes. This has been the Never Drop podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment below. What did you think about this fight? Do you think Terence Crawford won? And if he did, who should he fight next? That's all I got for you today. Peace. I'm out.